All right, moving on to the liver and the gallbladder. So the liver is like the biggest gland in the body. It's enormous. The liver takes up like the entire top part of your abdominal cavity. Starts at the biggest portions on the right side, and it kind of gets a little skinnier on the left. The liver secretes bile, and it does all kinds of other jobs. All right, so one of the things, if you want to live a long life, respect your liver. Love your liver. Treat your liver well. You will live a long life. The liver has ducts associated with it. The hepatic duct drains the bile from the liver. The cystic duct is the duct where bile leaves the gallbladder, okay? It enters and leaves the gallbladder. So I'll show you a picture in a minute. And then you have the common bile duct, which is where you have the hepatic duct and the cystic duct that drains into the duodenum. All right, so here's a picture. It's kind of squished a little bit, but here is the underside, so the inferior side of the liver, all right, and here's the gallbladder. And so you have the common hepatic duct here, the right and left hepatic ducts. Right here you have the cystic duct, okay, which connects up to the neck of the gallbladder. So what's the point of the gallbladder? The gallbladder stores the bile, but the liver makes it. Then the common bile duct goes down through the pancreas and dumps into the duodenum. It joins with the pancreatic duct to deliver, believe it or not, some of the enzymes that the pancreas makes for digestion. There's a separate a separate duct from the pancreas that we'll talk about later, okay? And so here's the duodenum. The duodenum is that initial portion of the small intestine. And there are some sphincter muscles associated with this region. Don't worry about that right now. That's something we talk about more in the upper division Bio-50 at Merced College. So the gallbladder, it's on the undersurface of the liver. You don't necessarily need a gallbladder to survive. It concentrates and stores bile that's made from the liver. And because it concentrates bile, there sometimes can be a disorder called gallstones. Gallstones are caniculi or stones. Caniculi are stones. Caliculi, not caniculi. There's a caniculus and a colliculus. Colliculi are the stones that develop when bile crystallizes from bile salts. Don't worry about that. And there are also calcium salts that can be found in the gallbladder. And when they become too concentrated, they produce little stones, which are extremely painful when they pass through the neck of the gallbladder into the cystic duct and then gets passed into the duodenum. So sometimes when some people have gallbladder issues or gallstones, doctors will go in and remove the entire gallbladder. We still have the production of bile happening. It's just there's no storage or concentration of the bile because for whatever reason, it was turning into stones, which is super, super uncomfortable when they pass into the duodenum. So cholelithiasis is a condition where you have the gallstones, and we're looking at that right here. And cholecystitis is the inflammation of the gallbladder, which comes along with having gallstones. Sometimes the gallstones can be big enough to completely obstruct the bile canals or all of the individual bile ducts, and that's a really bad thing because the bile will build up back into the liver itself and actually develop cirrhosis over time. So hepatitis itself, all right, moving on to other problems or diseases of the liver and the gallbladder. Hepatitis is liver inflammation, and this happens when your liver is sick and it becomes enlarged. When that happens, our body's not able to process urea it's not able to process nitrogenous wastes, extra protein and nitrogen in our system. And so the urea builds up in our circulatory system, and that produces a yellow pigmentation called jaundice. And typically what happens there is at first you look like you have a great tan, but then your skin starts looking yellow, and even the sclera, the whites of the eye, start looking yellow. Anorexia results from that, discomfort. Gray and white feces are one of the products because one of the ways our body gets rid of nitrogenous waste is through defecation. And if we're not producing lots and lots of those waste products, it doesn't go into the feces, and the feces actually doesn't look quite as brownish. And then urine becomes very dark. Hepatitis can happen because of exposure to toxins, a bacterial infection, viral infection, and parasites that can lodge in the liver. So hepatitis is not itself, hepatitis is a condition. Hepatitis B and hepatitis C are the result of infection. Now, cirrhosis is where liver tissue starts degenerating. It's damaged and it doesn't come back. It turns out that our liver actually undergoes replacement over our lifespan. The liver tissue is always exposed to, I guess you'd say, nasties. Liver is a major filter. The liver does a lot of conversion of one amino acid to another. And in the case of cirrhosis, the liver tissue is broken down faster than it can be replaced. And so what ends up happening to the damaged tissue is it becomes replaced by fibrous and fatty tissue. So fatty liver disease is an indication of cirrhosis starting up. Portal hypertension happens when there's high blood pressure in an individual, and that high blood pressure through the hepatic portal veins causes blood obstruction, and usually this will happen with like a blood clot or something also. And when that hits a diseased liver, that produces lots of other systemic circulatory issues within the liver itself. And so the liver is not able to receive nutrients or remove different waste products. It's a bad deal. Now, the pancreas is also a part of the digestive system as well as a metabolic gland, right? Making insulin and glucagon. So let's think about it in terms of a digestive organ. The pancreas produces what we call pancreatic juices or enzymes. These enzymes empty into the duodenum, which we saw a minute ago. And the pancreatic islets, or the islets of Langerhans, they produce glucagon and insulin. All right, so remember, that's metabolism, glucose metabolism. When we're dealing with enzymes, the pancreatic juices are going to be things like lipases, proteases, and amylases. Pancreatic disorders, pancreatitis is inflammation of the pancreas. So I hope you've gotten by now that titus, oops, sorry, all of a sudden my pen quit working. Titus means inflammation. Acute pancreatitis is actually going to cause a blockage of the ducts, and what will happen is the pancreatic juices and enzymes will get stopped up, and it'll dam up into the pancreas. And because these are digestive enzymes, protein digestive enzymes especially, will start actually digesting the gland. So the gland will start basically digesting itself, and that is very painful, a very nasty process. Cystic fibrosis is a genetic disease that results in very, very thick secretions, blocking the flow of pancreatic juices into the duodenum. And so in that particular case, in cystic fibrosis, individuals with the disease have trouble digesting food. There are medications that can help treat this, but until basically much more recently, individuals with cystic fibrosis did not have a long life for a number of reasons, but one of them is because secretions of pancreatic juices were not able to allow the individual to have enzymes available to digest their food. And then, of course, pancreatic cancer. This is a super serious form of cancer. It's pretty much fatal in almost everybody who gets cancer, because pancreatic cancer is not diagnosed until very late in the disease. Early diagnosis is basically through luck. And pancreatic cancer is usually fatal, unfortunately. Moving on to the large intestine. The large intestine has three regions: the cecum, the colon, and the rectum. The cecum, we'll get to what that does, but that is the connection to the small intestine, all right? Which part of the small intestine? So remember, you have the duodenum, the ileum, and the jejunum, right? Which part connects to the cecum? I'll let you go look at the picture of the intestines to figure that out. The colon has three sections: the ascending, the transverse, the descending, and then there's the sigmoid colon. I mean, that is a part of the colon, but I always think of the three big parts and then the sigmoid connecting to the rectum. The exterior opening is called the anus, and that's where waste products leave. The wall of the large intestine, again, lots of smooth muscle here, producing peristalsis that ultimately results in defecation. Again, a mucous membrane lining the large intestine, protecting the large intestinal tissue from nasty stuff, but also allowing a smooth movement for the waste products to pass out of the body. So here's the ileum. All right, haha, notice what I did with jejunum and ileum there. Here's the ileum entering into or dumping into the cecum. The ileocecal valve is a small muscular junction that can slow down emptying of the ileum into the cecum. The cecum itself is attached to the variform appendix. Sometimes when people get sick, and this will come up later, you'll have appendicitis. The cecum enters the ascending colon, which turns at the hepatic flexure, which is the right colonic. It can also be called the right colonic flexure, actually. You can call it either hepatic or right colonic, into the transverse colon, which then turns to the left colonic or the splenic. It's the same thing, flexure. Travels downward through the descending colon, travels over here adjacently to the sigmoid colon and out to the rectum. These tissues here are the mesentery that contain arteries and veins that help absorb nutrients here. There's not a lot of nutrients actually absorbed at the colon. There's a lot of water and some fats that are absorbed from the colon. You have the portal vein that branches, well, let's start with the artery. You have the descending aorta that branches into smaller blood vessels. Okay, that innervate, they don't innervate, that's the nervous system, but branch into the mesentery. And then we have this, the mesentery portal vein going out back into the heart. Well, going up to ascending circulation, you could say. So the large intestine contains the cecum, the colon, the rectum. Oh, we talked about this, sorry, wrong direction. Disorders of the large intestine, these usually have to do with motility or how long it takes for waste products to leave the large intestine. Diarrhea is when things go too fast, right? That can result in dehydration, and if somebody gets too dehydrated, they can have convulsions and electrolyte imbalances. Constipation results from decreased intestinal motility, and that results in lots and lots of intestinal cramping. Diverticulitis, here we are, itis again, inflammation of these little pouches called diverticula. So sometimes what happens in the colon is little pouches develop because sometimes the stool is too large and it overstretches the large intestine, and that causes little pockets to form. Diverticulitis can result in constipation, but it can also result in diarrhea, depending on what the individual has been eating. Diverticulitis can also result in severe infections of the large intestine that can be cleared up, fortunately, with antibiotics. Colitis is a general term for the inflammatory large intestine. So individuals who have colitis sometimes can decrease the inflammation, not so much taking NSAIDs and so forth, but by changing their diet, changing their stress and so forth in their basically lifestyle changes. And then colorectal cancer is a malignant type of cancer that's associated with polyps that develop usually later on in life. These polyps develop over a lifetime of eating a low fiber diet, a high fat diet. And then there is obviously a genetic predisposition because cancer oftentimes has genetic predispositions associated with it. Can colorectal cancer be screened? Yes, absolutely. That's where colonoscopies become important after the age of 50. So once you guys are 50, colorectal cancer screening becomes much more important. And the appendix and what is appendicitis? So remember, we were talking about the cecum. The appendix is basically a little tube that hangs off the cecum. It doesn't go anywhere. It's a blind-ended tube. It doesn't do anything in humans. Appendicitis is inflammation or infection of the appendix. If it ruptures, then doctors have to go in and clean that up. So here's the variform appendix right here. We will finish up with the peritoneum in one more lecture.